This is Otaku Station, broadcasting anime analysis to anyone who will listen. We have a basement archive full of an ever-growing collection of anime media. We dig deep into the great anime of the past to give you the context you need to fully appreciate the best this medium has to offer. Let's jam. Welcome to the broadcast. I hope you're having a good day wherever you happen to be right now. This is Otaku Station, where today we'll be talking about the first episode of the original Neon Genesis Evangelion TV series. Now, I'm back in the archive room, recovering from that hack we had last week. Put out the word letting everyone know to stay away from the tower until I get everything fixed. Did put in a call to some friends, and an engineer should be showing up soon to help repair the tower itself, so we're getting there. I do think I have the phase induction array stabilized, so we should be good until they get here. So let's head up to the research room to talk about the making of Evangelion, some behind-the-scenes stuff in terms of why the show and how the show got made. It's quite a story. Let's go behind the scenes of Evangelion. Now, I'm only going to talk about a few things here that I think are relevant or interesting. A lot has been made about what happened behind the scenes with pre-production and production being kind of a mess. The director Hideaki Anno was described as being like heavily medicated and badly depressed, but I don't think that's entirely accurate. While he was depressed and on medication, he wasn't the only person working on it, and I think you can't pin too much of the show on that. A lot of other people were writing episodes and involved in things, and so even though he was obviously directing how that would go, there are a lot of other influences on this as well, and so I think it's important to minimize the apparent influence of any one element. Lots of things were going on with Evangelion. And while it wasn't smooth sailing by any stretch, I don't think it was as much of a train wreck as people present it, and I'll explain a bit more later. I also want to mention the sort of financial straits under which Evangelion was being made. Studio Gianax was in trouble financially. They hadn't made great business deals on their prior anime. They're not business people, they're otaku. So this probably would have been their last production if it hadn't done well. In fact, I remember in the Noteki memoirs, them saying something along the lines of, we would have gone out of business, but Evangelion just wouldn't stop selling. The merch just kept flying off shelves. So they almost couldn't fail on Evangelion in terms of just the money kept coming in. So while that is true, it should be pointed out that Gianax had never been a stable company. They started out as a bunch of fans doing convention organizing and then selling garage kits under General Products. And each of their animation productions was kind of oh, hey, let's try this, let's do this. It was not a stable, we are employing a bunch of animators full-time, long-term for this. Another thing about Gianax is that, I think I mentioned this at some point during our analysis, Gianax was basically a handful of employees. The actual animation on their shows was usually done by an actual animation studio that they partnered with. Now, that does mean that members of Gianax, like Anno, would go to that studio and work in that studio. Physically, they would be there. But that studio was not Gianax. It would be Tatsunoko Productions or some other anime studio. Gianax was a separate legal and business entity that just employed, again, this handful of people. So again, the sort of business side of things was a little more complex. And when people talk about it being kind of their last hurrah, but it managed to save the company, it was a weird company to begin with, right? So that's, complicates things a little. Similarly, in terms of people kind of overstating things, Anno uses a ton of biblical symbolism and biblical terminology in Evangelion, but I think that was more for exoticism than as a consistent world view. Biblical terms sound cool, especially to a non-Western audience, meaning that it sounds exotic. It sounds like something, you're hearing these interesting terms and how do they correlate. And so he was using that. He was interested in the Bible and in Christianity. But Evangelion does not espouse Christian views. It's not a Christian anime. There are some Gnostic elements in it as well. But it really more uses Christian terminology to name like giant robots and computers and things like that, and in ways that more or less line up with their use, like the three magi. But the three magi in Evangelion are not meant to be literal symbols for the three magi in the Bible, right? Or their purpose in that story. It sounds cool more than anything else, and that kind of pulls things together. Now, again, this is not to criticize Anno, and one of the geniuses of Evangelion is the huge number of influences on Evangelion that you can pick out where the Anno is pulling in for this show. Examples include Mobile Suit Gundam for its like grounded, serious tone and traumatized warfighting teenagers, right? You can definitely see a lineage there. Ultraman for the Evangelion versus Angel fights. Jerry Anderson's UFO series for the computer UIs. That particular UI design aesthetic is very clearly from there. Also, the relationship between Gendo and Fuyutsuki is apparently based on the relationship between the commander and his right-hand man in UFO. They're not the same characters, but they have similar dynamic. Nausicaa, the Valley of Wind, and its God Warriors are definitely an inspiration for like the Angels, as well as the cross-shaped beams from Nausicaa. Granted, Anno literally animated the God Warriors and the cross-shaped beams in that movie, so that's not a surprise. Apparently, the apocalyptic ending of Devilman was a big inspiration. The monoliths from 2001 are clearly a thing in Evangelion as well. Even like Jet Jaguar from the Godzilla franchise was an inspiration for the name of Jet Alone. Jet Alone was going to be the original name of Jet Jaguar in like pre-production stuff, and they changed it to Jet Jaguar. So that's getting pulled in. Even stuff like the Andromeda Strain, a Hollywood movie from the 1970s, features this underground base with this shaft going down. So the idea of the shaft down to the geofront, inspired by this. And to be clear, and also, not just that, there are dialogue scenes in the Andromeda Strain that are very similar to dialogue scenes, like almost line for line in Evangelion. Now, that's not to complain, and it's not to denigrate Anno. This is how creativity works. You take inspiration from places and use that to create your own work. This is a wonderful melange of different elements, and Anno was not pulling those together randomly. He had problems to solve, and he solved them by taking inspiration from the various media he had consumed. He wants an underground base. How does that look like? What could be the various issues? They did that in the Andromeda Strain. Let me take inspiration from there. These monoliths in 2001. I need something to visually represent this thing. Monoliths from 2001, right? There are all these different things that come together in Evangelion to create something that feels new, that feels fresh, because specifically Anno has this encyclopedic fanish knowledge of science fiction and anime, and I think it comes together really, really well in Evangelion in the sense of feeling like a new thing, feeling like something fresh and memorable. So anyway, those are some behind-the-scenes things on Evangelion. Hope you found that useful. Welcome back. I hope you found that useful. Quick update, the engineer has shown up. Her name's Mito, quiet, blue hair, bob haircut. Reminds me of someone. Anyway, got to admit, I'm a bit wary of strangers at the moment, to be honest, but I need the help, and got her checking things out, so fingers crossed. Let us get to the analysis, but before that, a few things to watch out for in this first episode of Evangelion. The first is the almost dreamlike quality at the beginning, not in the sense of being abstract, but in the sense of just jumping into this weird experience, almost like the beginning of a dream where you're just suddenly somewhere and things are happening. Also note what we learn about the characters as they're introduced. And then thirdly, how different this is from a traditional mecha series, but also the things that are similar to traditional mecha series. They're kind of following the script some ways and deviating in other ways. So let's go ahead and get John and Steve online and get into Evangelion Episode 1. All right, we have got John and Steve on the line, ready to get into this. Yes, we're finally doing it. We're finally getting into Neon Genesis Evangelion, the original TV series. I'm really glad we're doing this because I think it's been a long time coming, and we're well positioned to dive deep but appropriately into Evangelion. You know, a lot of analyses go extremely deep, and we can find a nice balance here. So let's do it. So we're starting with the opening credit sequence, and it is definitely not some traditional imagery for anime OPs.
No.
What are we looking at here? Is this like a Staff of Life kind of a thing? I'm seeing Sephiroth on there. And
I always
Elohim.
thought it was Kabbalah.
Yeah.
These are the paths and the ways you have to get to talk to God.
Okay, yeah. Makes sense. It's definitely sort of traditional, sort of alchemical-esque imagery of kind of revelation of, I shouldn't say alchemical, but those kinds of old school imagery. Yeah. Not cute girls.
It is kind of alchemical in that, you know, for a Kabbalah to get through the gates, through the different angels, there are formulas. There are things that you have to do, very specific speeches, very specific like keywords that you have to use to pass each one. So it's very much like an alchemical kind of look.
Yeah, good point. How funny it is from a historical perspective to see manga published in. Like, we're legit. We have a manga, right?
Yeah. By the way.
All right, again, let's talk about what they're establishing here. The tone is definitely low beat. It's somber. We're not seeing characters piloting mecha, and rushing into space or any of that stuff. They're not punching the sky. It's a much more quiet tone, interestingly, for your opening theme. And again, about the folks would know this is the opening theme. It's not like this is going to be different in different episodes.
Right.
I do want to point out something, for those who have seen Evangelion or are aware of it, how odd it is that they juxtapose Misato and Shinji here.
Yeah.
Not a relationship that is foregrounded a lot in the TV series itself, but does, in fairness, form an important emotional connection for the characters. But again, compared to some of the other characters in the anime, why these two? It's odd. And again, it's not Gendo and Shinji. It's not other characters that have a much more dramatic impact on the story. It's just interesting. So this is something worth pointing out that people aren't necessarily always familiar with. When you see here, it says Animation Production, Tatsunoko Productions, and Gianax. What that turns out to mean is that Tatsunoko Productions provided the actual animation staff. Gianax organized it, produced it, if you will. They wrote it and conceived it and maybe storyboarded it. But they are not an animation studio. They don't have hundreds of animators on staff. Tatsunoko Productions provided that for them. So they're the ones actually animating, in effect, Evangelion.
So that's a big data dump.
Yeah. So we have
Here's everybody in the show.
Yeah. Everything that's going to happen. So you have this quiet beginning, and these still images basically they're going back and forth to, and then just rapid fire imagery, almost faster than you can comprehend, and not in some obvious pattern, which is remarkable. It definitely feels like they're plugging directly into the back of your head and trying to throw the entire show at you. But it's yeah.
Well, I was going to say, one thing it does very effectively is that, as we're leading up to this part of it, we have Shinji, who is a very bland character design. Honestly, everything else that's happened around him is more interesting to look at. But clearly they're showcasing him as the main character, and then suddenly you get into this thing where it's just like Tokyo 3. Okay, wait, okay, we're going to these. Who are these people? And then it says Absolute Terror Field. What is that? So immediately you're going to be like, okay, I just need to know what that is, right? Or who these people are. So we'll continue watching.
Yeah, that's a great point. I also think they're kind of establishing their general tone, which is quietness and action, right? That's really where they're going to go with this. Is going to be kind of contemplative and thoughtful, but you will have your action. You will have your exciting moments. They also show us the mecha designs, which are really weird. And we should point out, this is 1995. You really hadn't seen these sort of biomechanical designs outside of Or Bachelor Dunbean or a few other shows. But this is very different for the time. And I do want to point out this image, because I think it is surprisingly representative of the show, in the sense that Shinji never looks like this in the show.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
And the fact that he has this very heroic movement to him. This is a standard shonen movement, right? That kind of action. And
I will do the thing. I will not be wishy-washy. I will not be emo
Shinji
boy
Ikari.
or any of that. Shinji
I
Ikari.
won't be Shinji. Yeah.
I will not
I'll
be
be not
Shinji.
me.
Yeah. So I wonder if this is a sort of promise to the audience, saying whatever you see of Shinji, he will get to some point where he is self-confident. Because you get this every episode, and you're like, okay, please, get there.
Yeah.
This is kind of interesting because it is similar to the how Akira begins.
Yeah.
This is 1988. This the explosion. So they're somewhat, I think, pulling forward from that. There's also a little bit of just sort of general film language here of just opening with this big text slate. All right, so again, one of the first shots of the anime, what are they establishing? We have... Flooding. Yep, flooded city. So some kind of apocalypse has happened, and some weird thing under the ocean. And I think this is important, too, because it's establishing a couple of things. This feels more like a monster movie, right? This feels like a shot out of a Godzilla movie or another, disaster movie, whatever. Not a typical mecha anime opening. So they're kind of establishing where they're coming from. This feels more like an enemy from Ultraman, for example, right? So they're playing around with that, I think. And here's your first shot of that design, and what a design.
Yeah.
Like, you look at that and you think, what even is that? Is that a giant robot at all? Is it some probe? It doesn't match anything we're used to seeing in traditional anime or science fiction, etc. And obviously it's pulling from various references and so forth. Actually, comes more out of Nausicaa than anything else, in my opinion. And we'll see more of that later. But again, establishing we have this very unique aesthetic that we're using here.
Yeah.
I also want to call out just, animation detail. They're actually animating the little runs, the streaks on the side of the creature. So you see those move as it's moving through the water, despite the fact that the creature itself is static. It's a single image, but they kind of drew that on top to give it a little bit of extra visual flair. And I love the little detail, which they had to animate, of the gills opening and closing, that he's moving slowly, the gills close, and he pushes forward a little bit further. And it's a little world-building creature detail that you register almost subconsciously. And now, a Godzilla shot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Lined up tanks on a rise, shooting down at something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we know where this is going. So let's establish what's going on here. John, is this how a train station ever looked in Japan?
Never. There's always people somewhere, and the trains are moving.
Yep.
It's not
Right.
ever just parked next to each other quietly. So,
Yeah. So not only a state of emergency, like this is unheard of level. To that point, all lines stopped.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's- bad things are happening. That said, again, think how kind of Ghibli this feels. Quiet, nothing. You're just hearing the sounds of animals and birds, crickets, cicadas rather.
Yeah.
It almost feels like a moment out of a Ghibli movie. It's all a ma, what they call, those quiet moments in a work. So strange with all of the sort of Godzilla imagery.
Well, to this, the you notice nobody's on the street.
Yeah.
He's on the street somehow, and she's looking for him, presumably, and
Yeah.
but everyone's so organized to get out of the way to get where they need to be that everything is done, stopped, abandoned, whatever.
Yeah.
Everybody's where they need to be, which means that, this is not the first time.
True.
Yeah.
Great point. Everyone knew exactly what to do. You're right.
What to do. Yeah.
And I like this image for it's got very soft colors, but
Yeah.
the further back you go, those trees and the mountain behind look almost like watercolor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You go from the angular sharp lines to it just sort of softens as it goes back to the background.
And we have a telltale sign up on the signboard. It actually does say Tokyo 3.
That's true.
So what does that mean? Well, we will find out.
Yeah.
It's the third best Tokyo there could be.
Exactly. So let's address kind of the elephant in the room. So this individual is waiting for Shinji and is flirting with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lipstick kiss on the actual
I know,
card.
right?
Yeah. Much less the attention here, please.
Yeah. And the little heart to Shinji, there's a little heart drawn at the end of it, like,
Yeah.
really? And on the other side, too.
Yeah. And I don't want to get into too deep into the show if you haven't seen it yet, although presumably you have. But there's an argument saying that Misato knows what Shinji's family life is like. And so she is pulling out all the stops to get him to come here. She's using everything she can think of to possibly catch his attention to do that. Whether she is serious about this or not, I don't think she is. I think it's just like, please, Shinji, I am actually I'm not like your parents, basically, or your father at least.
But how else to get? But she's also playing off the fact that he's a 14-year-old boy.
True.
I mean, if you were a 14-year-old boy and this was given to you, you'd be like, I'm inclined to go to the place to wait.
And then pin it up on your bedroom wall.
Exactly.
Oh.
Yep. The first indication that, regardless of all the science fiction stuff, there's something deeper going on here. There's something more supernatural, potentially. I think this is a very important shot because we know from later on that this is not simply bad guys attack, beat them, fight them off. That there's something way weirder going on here. A little like Space Runaway Ideon, right? Yes, sci-fi, but other layers of things. I think that's what this is promising, is not just sci-fi, basically. So I want to call out the effort this takes. It would be easy for them to show that, cut to something else, the street, do the boom, and just see everything reverberating. But watching Shinji react to the boom tells you about Shinji. That he's not used to this. He's not ready for this. He's afraid. And there it is.
Yep.
Our first, presumably enemy giant robot of the show. Sort of gorilla in the room, or angel in the room. If anything, it looks like a god warrior from Nazgûl the Valley of Wind. And it does feel like they're kind of playing off that imagery with slow lumbering, etc. It's what you would expect those to look like. It's what you saw in the very beginning of the movie. And I think that's also partly intentional, because the otaku who watch this know what the God Warriors did.
Yeah.
And we're seeing this ruined world, so we're making these connections as to, this presumably is what destroyed the world.
Dun, dun, dun.
Literally. And to that point, I do think it's funny that they literally go into a dun 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 music at this point. But we also get a little bit of background, right? A little bit of backstory.
Right.
It's been 15 years. The angels have returned. So we know that's what they call these things. And I love the dissonance of that term, right? Of using the word angels for a giant machine of destruction. Makes you wonder, what? Why is this an angel? And just, sets things up interestingly. And here we're establishing, again, some kind of not quite science fictional kind of propulsion ability, right? Like nothing we can even imagine can just hover like that. So, interesting.
So, aside from Masato just showing up.
Yeah.
One of the things about this particular short little scene of the angel doing the thing is that we hear the radio chatter of the helicopter pilot dying.
Mm-hmm. True.
Right? So we know that this is not a shonen thing where, people jump out of the airplane before it impacts and blows up. Mm-hmm. No, dude's dead. He's screaming all the way down. Yeah. And one of the other things to make this more, putting this in quotations, real, is Shinji's reaction to all this, which would be anybody's reaction. If you have not seen this before, yes, screaming like a little girl, yes, I think that would happen. Yes, know, and this is establishing that okay, this is not Transformers, this is not this is not Voltron, this is not any of that. People will die.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there are high stakes there. There are high stakes here.
Yeah, you think about how a typical shonen protagonist would react to that. It would be this.
Right.
Okay, how do I help?
How do I help? Where's the manual to get into the thing, to do the thing? No. Yeah. It's here. It's just like, I am hoping I don't crap myself. That is the best I can do at this moment, because that's literally that frightening.
Mm-hmm. I would argue it's also pulling in elements of the first episode of Mobile Suit Gundam, right? Amuro's just running, trying to get away. He's not a combatant, and Zaku attacks, blows up a bunch of people. Amuro's just reacting to that. Obviously, he's not screaming like a little girl, but he's in a very similar situation to that scene there. So we're kind of connecting that dot as well, those dots.
Now, Shinji's remaining in position.
True.
By pure terror, or is that somewhat of an indication that because he didn't just run. He screamed, he's frightened by it. Mm-hmm. He's not like often portrayed when somebody's scared in anime and they're dumbstruck and they have no reaction. They're just paralyzed with fear. Yeah. Shinji is well aware he's afraid as hell, but he's also not running for it. True. He's still there. This helicopter thing comes crashing down. The angel steps on it, and he doesn't budge. Yeah. He could have. He already thought, should I go to the shelter? True. So, you know what I mean? Sticking where he is to be picked up. Yeah. That shows a slight amount of fortitude. True. Might not be a great amount.
I'd also argue you could also see it that it shows that he's not action oriented. Right. He's not the kind of person who just does the thing. He's more reacting to situations. He's more of a contemplative kind of a person, which we do see later on in the show. But no, I agree that this is shock. It's not panic.
Right.
Which is interesting. Note the facial expression of the angel here. The fact that it's kind of curious. There's no apparent malice in how this creature is acting so far, which is, again, kind of interesting from a mecha or even Godzilla movie kind of perspective.
Some kind of kaiju, yeah.
Right.
Well,
yeah, we have not yet heard Ruler Zill talk about how he wants to destroy humanity, right? Just this thing has shown up.
Yeah. It's almost like he's looking at the thing and again, this is the point of it, is to show that nothing that's happening so far is really doing anything to it. And it's almost like as if it's like looking at the helicopter going, "Hey buddy, what you doing?"
Yeah.
Well, I hadn't noticed, like, shortly after this scene, it blinks.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I had not recalled ever seeing an angel blink.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
Right there. It, like, blinks its eyes. Like,
do we see that? Better? Yeah. There we go. Mm-hmm.
It's much more expressive.
Yeah. It's also interesting because you think about, what is it blinking at, right? It's not explosions happening around me, so I'm closing my eyes. It's just blinking. Almost like it's changing its ability to see, adjusting its eyesight. It's not even a protective gesture.
Yeah.
Somebody had to draw all of the blur lines in that. As she's moving through, that's not a filter, that's not something else. That is somebody literally moving all of those little lines to make it look like her hand is blurring as it's moving through. It's lovely stuff. So let's talk about the sort of goofiness of this.
Yeah.
They're definitely juxtaposing the attack on the angel with Misato being a little bit of a goofball and just trying to get out of there. And it's an interesting juxtaposition. I think it is not uncommon for mecha and anime in general to have those elements of something kind of strange going on or something oddball going on during a battle. But they are establishing that here, definitely. All right, this is our first really good shot of the headquarters. And let's talk about the visuals here and kind of what they're implying. So we're certainly seeing a large organization. It is heavily technologized. There's technology that is certainly way beyond anything in 1995, but staffed by humans, used by humans. And you have that very specific sort of unicolor effect of the yellow, the red, and the green. Presumably presenting different kinds of information about what's going on. There's clearly a lot of thought put into what they're presenting for this being this location.
Love those impact lines, and then this.
Yeah. What an image. And I love this because it is novel, right? It's not just shells bouncing off. It's not whatever. It is literally reaching out for a missile and just destroying the missile as it's coming to him. And then, of course, it explodes, and it doesn't matter at all. Just somebody thought about, what can we do that's really cool here? Let's look at this image here, right? We have all of the military guys, and we have the cigarettes. Clear visual language that they've all been here trying to figure out what to do. They've been working on this problem, and it's failing. And again, think visual language. In a Godzilla movie, this would happen 3/4 of the way into the movie.
Right.
The big assault on the kaiju. So the fact that we're leading with this, and the fact that the military is already out of options, tells us a lot.
Yeah. And what a big oh crap moment. You just when when you look at the headquarters and you see the various functions that they see in terms of visual, and that is large. That is like house-sized stuff. So he's seeing a house-sized vision of this angel just looking straight at you. I don't think my reaction would be the guy in the center like this. I think it would be more like, exit. Where's the exit?
Well, actually,
we have a deeper shelter.
Right. Which says a lot about, they assume they're safe to a certain extent. On the other hand, they're military, so there's a certain amount of, well, if we get blown up, that's kind of part of the job. So you do get that sometimes. But yeah, it is interesting seeing the reactions here. All right, what does that look like?
A big damn blast.
Yeah.
An atomic weapon, if you will.
Definitely. And leading, I love how quickly they can lead up to this, and you still have that dread because a red phone. We know what red means and what a red phone means, but he had to use a swipe card to even answer it.
Yep.
Which means that he has to have some type of access. He has to be a bigwig to be able to just pick up that phone and answer it, right? And then he goes, he gives the order, and you're just like, well, you've done everything. You've done everything else to it. What else can you? Oh, you're gonna do that.
Yeah. Okay. And I like that this was preceded by Gendo saying, "Conventional weapons, do nothing against it." Oh, that's not a conventional weapon, is it?
No.
And again, a little bit of comedy here of smothering Shinji and the butt shot.
Keep in mind that she called it an N2 mine.
True.
Yeah.
Not a missile, not a thing, not whatever. So this, if it's implied that's a mine, then it should not be as powerful as a missile, right? And a nuclear mine.
Yep.
Yeah. Also, it is an N2 mine, not the N2 mine.
Yeah.
So presumably they have these planted all over the place, just in case. Oh.
Which, I mean, we saw the giant missile. It grabbed and spliced the missile. So what's the probably best way to get at it? It can't interfere with something that's under its feet.
Great point. Yep. And again, the goofiness there of them staring with surprised expressions. And I just like, you have Misato with the, and Shinji kind of with the eyes closed, kind of trying to look.
What I love about again, there's so much to love about this, but when they show the car being flipped over and it moves and then flips, all that sequencing, if you remember your history of watching old 50s shots of what happens to fake villages when they let off a bomb, when they're doing bomb testing, and this is what you see, and this is what you've seen in the past. So they Jinro did something very similar to the scene in the sewers where the special forces find the rebels and they shoot them up. They actually had to go through footage and also personal experience to get that action right. And this is exactly what those little movies used to look like. So there is that right there, and you're just like, and then followed with the thought of, they just nuked their own backyard.
Yeah. And to be clear, in Japan, you cannot call anything a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
That's just not a thing that you can do on television. It's an N2 mine.
Right.
Much like in Macross, it is. What are they called in Macross?
Reaction weapons.
Reflex weapons. Yeah.
Reflex.
So this is not an atomic bomb. And
I
think it's also important because it does let them get away with a few little things where it's like, in world, it is probably not literally an atomic bomb. It is some variation thereof. So, they're not literally like irradiating half of Japan with this, right? It's powerful, but it's not doing all the things an atomic bomb would do. Going back to the earlier shot of them all looking at this kind of surprised, and then we get this shot of all of the generals celebrating. This is here because every single viewer watching this knows this is not enough.
Yeah.
Yes.
We know what's going to happen next, that it's fine, and it's going to keep on attacking, right? We have to have the shot of the generals going, yay, our special weapon worked.
And then their utter disappointment. No, how could it fail?
Notice the imagery here, too. Those aren't recent.
Yeah.
Right.
Those craters and such. That wasn't something that landed in there and fell out. Something else bad has been happening here. There's a line of dialogue in here, 2 lines, that I think actually are kind of prophetic. Shinji goes, well, my mouth is full of dirt. And Misato goes, you'll be all right. If that isn't kind of what happens to Shinji for the next 25 episodes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they're establishing a few things here. First, it is breathing in some sort of atomic hellhole. And that seems fine for it, but then it's regenerating.
Yeah.
And what a powerful thought that is. Of because it clearly had some kind of effect, But even that effect isn't enough to really stop it. And actually, I'm just realizing, wow, the center head is the original head. That's the one that got destroyed. We are watching the new head grow over the original head. Ugh.
Mm-hmm.
Grody.
How many cars have we had that happen in our lives?
Where duct tape is the answer.
The answer, yes.
And clearly she had a roll of duct tape in her car.
Right.
Yeah.
She's used to this.
Yeah.
That poor car.
You just barely survived an attack by a giant alien creature angel thing, and you're worried about your car payments.
Yeah.
Setting a tone. Certain amount of tonal shifting happening in this episode.
Yes, just a little.
What does that mean? The fact that it fired at a sensor means it knows what the sensors are and that they're worth taking out. So, intelligence. Mm-hmm. Also, that is the exact same beam effect as a God Warrior from Nazca. It really does a cross-shaped thing and then... So, even further. Now let's talk about, what else we're learning here. Government agents still not apparently very concerned. They're annoyed, at most.
Yes.
Gendo is totally confident, and the chatter in the background it's like it's AT&T. It's just very, okay, I'll be back online at some point. Everyone's taking this very blasé. Another spare is being delivered. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't know this is Shinji's father, you will quickly make those connections. What does that imply about their relationship?
Warm and loving?
Mm-hmm.
No.
They have a great Christmas tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Slaps all around.
Come.
So a few things to call out here. First, just get here. Also, everything's been censored.
Yep.
But then also note the red scribble marks.
Yeah.
That's not government censoring. That's Shinji.
Frustrated anger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do love the fact that Nerve has a new employee handbook.
Yeah.
Do not sexually harass while you're saving the world.
Apparently not in the handbook.
Nope. Nobody's ever thought to address that.
Yeah. Yeah. Misato. This is obviously not the first movie to feature an underground base. No. Or, even an underground city. But a flipped version of Tokyo is a pretty neat image. An upside-down Tokyo above a pyramid is definitely an image you don't get out of your head real quick. Let's talk about the implications of this technology here, right? Mechanical switches being used to indicate the progression of an elevator. Everything being just kind of hardwired in. Like, this is heavy duty technology, right?
Right.
So this is our first term from ancient history, Marduk. Marduk being the hero who saved Sumerian civilization mythologically. So we're starting to get into mythological elements here. Also note that the first reaction is to talk above Shinji's head. And to talk like he's not in the room. They weren't already at battle stations.
Yeah.
Really? Maybe you should have done that by now. Just saying. What a shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
The slow reveal of the hand. But also, this is our first artsy shot, really. Something we'll see a lot more of in Evangelion.
Yeah.
Of the silhouettes with something going on behind them. But this is literally just a silhouette and then a background that we're kind of panning down on to achieve this shot, but boy, is it effective.
Well, I like the framing for it because now we get this strange thing behind Shinji, and it is an indication of how it is going to grasp his existence and take him on a ride through this show.
Mm-hmm. And this is not a Transformers robotic hand either.
Yeah.
Like, they're calling it out right here. I think a lot of people missed it. I know I did. They call it a synthetic life form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a robot. We've got a lot going on here in terms of who knows what in this. And it seems a little weird on first viewing that some people don't know what's going on. But this speaks to a lot of Gendo's psychosis, if you will. Gendo never shares anything unless there's a clear need to. And so there are all sorts of elements of this that he's just not getting across. Everyone has to kind of intuit what's happening next and who's doing what. So Misato was sent to get Shinji. She knows Shinji's going to be a pilot at some point. She does not realize he is here to pilot and how here today.
Yeah.
Right.
I love the fact that Shinji just looks put upon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's not excited. He's not afraid. He's just it's like looking at somebody who's just dead inside.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, he's been gone from his father purposely for 3 years. Everything leading up to this, no matter, even though it's not said outright, just like, yeah, this isn't going to go well. Mm-hmm. And, the letter from Ikari to Shinji, which is literally, come, get here now, boy. Not son, I need your help. Can you help me out? Or anything like this. Come here now. And he obeys. Mm-hmm. This is the other part of it. He didn't actually have to, but he's doing it. And this is, just kind of he knows what's happening next. He knows that he's being controlled. He knows that there's all this stuff, whatever the baggage that we're going to learn as the series progresses, it's already flashing through his mind. And he's trying to figure out, what am I going to do now?
This is the face of somebody who's used to this.
Yeah.
Oh, and it should be pointed out. And again, they're talking past him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a sense in which Gendo Ikari is right.
Mm-hmm.
If you could write this scene where Gendo is a very loving father who basically does not want Shinji part of any of this, and so send him away. And so, it's why, why am I sending for you? Because now there's a need for you to be here. You didn't need to be here, so I sent you away to be safe. And then he even says, and this is kind of an interesting concession on his part, where he says, there's no way, and Gendo goes, you'll be instructed. Like, no, we're not throwing you in there and assuming you're going to figure it out. Like, we've got this. So the logic is there. The bedside manner is not.
Yeah, the delivery leaves much to be desired for.
Indeed. And then, cutting to the reactions of all the people around does tell us exactly what is going on here, that everyone feels bad for this kid.
Yeah. And they're obviously also not particularly surprised the way Gendo is.
No.
So it's kind of like, wow, I feel sorry for that kid, because Gendo's a jackass.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Yeah. Boss is yelling again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go. One more time.
All right, so now we're building tension. We're building threat that is getting closer and closer. And now we have a better sense of its goal, is to get to them. On the one hand, this speech from Misato is very on the nose, but it is kind of laying out the themes of the series. And I think people watching this, especially the older fans who'd grown up with mecha anime, watching this would go, okay, I get it. This is about dealing with your father. This is about dealing with yourself. That this is not your typical shonen protagonist who needs to grow up, but is ready for action. This is somebody who is not ready for action and needs to swing in that direction. What a great line.
Yeah.
Not dead yet. All right, so now we hear Rei for the first time. And we're getting a sense of who she is. Her answer is simply yes. He tells her what to do, and she says, yes, sir. Complete submission. Here's a question I sometimes ask folks. Were they actually going to use Rei, or is this emotional blackmail for Shinji?
I think
feels like emotional blackmail.
well, I was gonna say with Gendo, it's both.
Yeah,
I mean, he would rather have Shinji spare a fresh pilot to go into the thing to do the job, because now Rei is an unknown quantity about whether or not she's going to be able to do it because she's so banged up. But if Shinji's just not going to do it and they have no choice, then they have no choice. She's got to get in there.
Yeah.
So, but I think it is definitely initially Gendo, being the great father that he is, going, "Hey Shinji, here's the consequence of your decision. Have fun."
Yeah.
We're going to have
Bring
you watch
her in
this.
with the IV, the whole journey. It's just like, oh wow.
And she's wincing in pain and the whole 9 yards. We're going to guilt you into this.
Yeah. Gendo could have said, if you're not doing it, Shinji, get off my dock.
True.
Right.
Get out of the room.
Yeah.
And he just lets him stand there. So it's like, I think that was designed, as you had said, Steve, for dual effect.
Yeah.
It's like, look, Shinji, here you go.
We're starting to get our cross-shaped explosions, where in Nausicaa it was like out of the nozzle you saw the cross. Now the explosion is literally forming a cross. So we're getting some interesting, unusual effects. Again, getting into that being kind of quasi-supernatural effects here.
Buildings are falling down.
Yeah.
Entire buildings are just blink. Now, can you imagine being inside of one of those buildings and you're just dropping? You're just like, oh, great.
Look, I'm weightless. Oh no.
You smug bastard.
I knew he would resonate.
This is the first emotion he has expressed. I had never noticed before that the eye switches on right here.
Yep.
Interesting. And note that it seems to be looking at Shinji.
Yeah, she probably wouldn't be that hurting if you kept your hand out of her wounds. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to stab you in the kidney.
This is a specific aesthetic that you can trace back to the sci-fi show UFO. You've seen that from I think it was late 70s, maybe early 70s, British sci-fi show. And if you look at how they did kind of the paneling and the images and so forth, it was very much an inspiration for this show. Gendo Ikari and Fuyabuki were also inspired by the commander and his sort of right-hand man in that show as well. So we're getting this very interesting sort of medical concept here. It's not going into the head, it's not going into the stomach, it's not going into the chest, as you would for a Gundam or whatever. It's being inserted like where the spinal column would be. A very different approach than you see in most mecha series. Also establishing scale. That somebody's inside that little entry plug. This is massive.
Yeah.
One thing, I know they did that for effect, right? To have him have that reaction to that. But I think under normal circumstances, you would be like, okay, we're going to put you in this thing. By the way, real quick, we're going to flood it with this liquid. Try not to panic. It's okay. You're going to be okay.
No. Well, also, this is a staff that's used to working with Rei Ayanami.
Yes.
Yeah. Where you don't have to explain, she just takes it.
Yeah.
I also like, having seen the show, and this is not a spoiler if you haven't, thinking back to the idea of why is it locked in?
Yeah.
No other giant robot needs to be locked in place. That's odd. I just love this little detail that we're in this big epic launch sequence, and there's just somebody on a gangway just taking it all in. And there's a bit of the audience there of just, wow, isn't this amazing?
Yeah.
Notice that expression. Shinji's gotten a little bit more confident there, or at least more set, decisive,
Determined.
Yeah. So that was episode 1. What stood out to you?
That it's a very different type of robot movie or robot TV show. that we know it's a synthetic being. It looks like a robot. It's got all these mechanical kind of things going on, but it's not really entirely clear what do they mean synthetic. Like, how are we supposed to interpret it? Is it synthetic biological? Is it like some kind of weird synthetic mechanical thing? So it uses, different material types. How are you defining this? That the angels are definitely what looks like a biological entity, even though it's as big as a mecha. It doesn't look very mecha-ish. So it's a distinctly different type of big robot show.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. This, this was in '95, so we have Gundam, and Gundam is very mechanical, and we get the idea of Gundam, and it's more about the pilot inside of Gundam, blah blah blah, and there's no, like big alien guys, man versus man in these machines, and then we do have the big robot shows from going all the way back to the '60s. Some kindly grandfather or uncle, weird uncle, makes the thing, and the boy accidentally flips the switch, and he becomes the only pilot man who can fly this thing. And here we get none of that. And what we get is a kid who's showing up. We at first don't know why, and this hottie shows up there to pick him up. And there's a little bit of goofiness going on, but there's this threat that we get early on where it's not just, here's the thing to come to take over Earth. It's like killing stuff, and it's looking for something. And we know that Shinji is going to factor into all this somehow, and we're used to maybe the robot will choose him, or he will choose the robot, or the thing will happen. And instead, what we get is a 14-year-old boy who is dealing with a very immature woman who appears to have some actual ability in a bureaucracy.
Yep.
And then we go from watching this angel thing coming to attack and waiting for the big fight to happen to getting, dude hates his dad. And his dad does not really care about that or the fact that the kid exists, other than to further his own agenda.
Yeah.
And it's just, we get that, and then we get the fact that people are not treating him as a person, and they're, and the closest thing that anybody treats him to as a person is Masato, who eventually kind of goes in a little bit of mom mode and goes, hey, buck up, camper. We need you to do the thing. You got to do the thing.
Yeah.
And and we learn very early that Gendo is going to use whatever he can do to get the thing done.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what's really nice in this one episode where we're giving a lot of information but also being told nothing is the fact that we don't get the robot fight.
Yeah. That's remarkable.
Yeah.
Well, it's also interesting at the outset. You've got your cast of characters in the intro. You've got things that are going on, things that are going to happen. You think it's big robot. You have a very kind of light thing. Yes, there's the fighting is going on, but you have the goofiness with the car. You know what I mean? It's just kind of little light humor, and as the episode goes on, the humor just drops the hell out of the story.
Yeah,
where it's like I could see somebody starting to watch this and be like, oh, it's going to be like some serious moments, but it's going to be tempered with a sort of a light hand, a lightheartedness that'll help to ease some of that discomfort. It's like, oh hell no.
Yeah.
It just gets more serious the deeper you go in just the one episode. It's like,
And we're learning, the only things that we really learn about Shinji, other than a really bad relationship with his father, is the fact that as they're talking over him, they're saying, "Oh, he's the third child." What does that mean? Because that's a very archaic thing to say. It's not true. Oh, he is the pilot that our data analysis says that he might be the third one of X amount of children. He's the third out of X many to be able to possibly do the thing. Yeah. No, it's the Marduk report says he's the third child. I mean, you almost have expected them to be dressed up in priestess robes when they're saying something like that, right? And
a third child that was foretold.
Yes, and the scrawlings are on the wall, and and then you have this like really kind of long dialogue, but it's instead of being talkie like in Ghost, where it's just like two people, blah, 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 they decide to use imagery to also communicate other things, like this right here. There's movement in the reflection in Gendo's glasses, and they're constantly going back and forth. So you're not getting bored, right, with the discussion, but you're kind of vested into what people are saying.
Yeah.
But I will say that for those of you who are watching this and have not watched this before, get used to Shinji's reaction to everything in that manner. That's this is something that just happens, and you're just gonna have to deal with that. And but yeah, I mean, and it's just, this would be the kind of thing, like if you were a parent and you didn't know any better, and you knew your kid, your 8-year-old kid likes big robots, and you saw the cover of this, and you're like, oh, this, you know what? I'll let Junior watch this.
Yep.
Right, and the big mistake is going to be some 8-year-old just going, either they're going to be like confused or they're going to start crying.
Yeah.
So you realize that this is not your shonen show.
Yeah. And to that point, so much of the show is doing both at the same time. Right, this episode is laying out, we have giant robots, we have a monster that we're trying to defeat, we have secret underground base, we have all of these, we have a variety of tropes. We have the boy being given robot by his father, but then all of those things get adjusted in some way, right? Boy hates father. Secret underground base is giant underground cavern that's also a city, above and below. The secret organization is this actual paramilitary organization. Like it is assigned to the UN. It's not a inventor off in the middle of nowhere with his personal laboratory, right?
Right.
All of these things are being played around with and changed around, and I think it does surprise those who are used to these things. But yeah, there's a lot here. Any other thoughts on episode 1?
I like the mechanical design of the helicopters or the hover ship.
Hover ships. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they put a great amount of detail into that, and of course when you're looking at the EVA unit itself, it's like, wow, this is a commitment to that kind of quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also cool because you think back to this episode and there's not a ton of highly detailed animation, really. Much of this sequence indeed with the hover things, they're just static images, and we see them maybe hovering and moving, moving laterally back and forth in the frame, things along those lines. Explosions are literally just, being superimposed on top of the things. There's a lot of economy here without ever feeling cheap.
Right.
They really know how to use that budget effectively. Will that continue? Well, that's a thing. But yeah.
We have hopes.
We have hopes, yeah.
We shall see.
Cool. That's episode 1 of Evangelion. Welcome back. I hope you found that useful. Good news, Mito's great. We're getting on really well. She's doing a complete inspection. Everything's going fine. She's just quiet. So she's back in there working on stuff, and we're all good. Sometimes you've just got to trust. Thanks for watching. Until next time, watch more anime.